The distress signal was ancient, its broadcast weak and fragmented by the ravages of time and space. Yet, somehow, it had persisted, an automated plea for salvation, pulsing across the void for centuries. It originated from the VR-Kesh Dominion, a once great empire that had dominated the galactic core before vanishing without explanation. Entire worlds had gone dark. Trade routes had crumbled into nothingness. Their people had simply disappeared. For millennia, no one dared approach the ruins of the Dominion. Fear and superstition held the galaxy in check. The few automated probes that returned carried fragmented images of derelict cities, abandoned ships still in orbit, and something far worse, corpses untouched by time, frozen in expressions of terror. The galactic community had written them off as a cautionary tale. And then, against all odds, a voice spoke from the void. "Survivors, trapped, help us." The words were weak, garbled, but unmistakable. Someone was still there. Someone who had lived through whatever had annihilated an empire. The Federation Council convened an emergency session. Every major race debated their course of action. The VR-Kesh had once been feared conquerors, ruthless in their expansion, but the ghosts of history had silenced them. If there were survivors, they could provide answers or warnings. But none of the so-called civilized races dared answer the call. Only one species did. A species ignored in the corridors of power. A species feared not for its intellect or diplomacy, but for its sheer ability to endure. Humans, the Deathworlders. And so, Task Force Revenant was born. A coalition of Earth's best, elite soldiers, scientists, engineers, assembled for one purpose: to venture into the dead empire and uncover the truth. They expected ghosts. What they found was far worse. Chapter 1. Into the Void. The UNS Revenant dropped out of FTL in a violent burst of Cherenkov radiation, its reinforced hull groaning as reality reasserted itself. The ship was a modified stealth frigate, outfitted for deep space reconnaissance and rapid response. But this time, there would be no reinforcements, no backup. If they found trouble out here, they'd have to handle it alone. Commander Alex Mercer stood at the helm, staring at the view beyond the bridge's reinforced windows. VR-Xyz Prime, the former capital of the VR-Kesh Dominion, loomed like a corpse. The planet was still intact, its vast cityscape stretching for miles in eerie silence. No lights, no movement. A graveyard. A voice cut through the tense silence. "We're picking up the source of the distress signal," said Lieutenant Naomi Carter, the team's communications specialist. "It's coming from the lower levels of the capital city, deep underground." Mercer exhaled sharply. That complicated things. "Any signs of life?" Carter frowned. "Technically, yes, but it's erratic. Either interference is screwing with our scans, or whatever's down there isn't in good shape." The Revenant's AI, SID-12, pulsed a life on the main console. Sensors indicate no orbital defenses. Surface structures are heavily damaged. No active power sources detected. However, there is something unusual. Mercer turned toward the hollow display as SID-12 projected a heat map of the planet's surface. One section glowed dimly beneath the crust. "That's geothermal activity," Carter noted. "Something still drawing power down there." Sergeant Darius Kane, their tactical officer, leaned forward. Could be survivors. Could be a goddamn nest of something worse. Mercer's jaw clenched. That was the unspoken reality of their mission. No one knew what had wiped out the VR-Kesh. If anything had survived this long, it wasn't by accident. "Prep the team," Mercer ordered. "We're going in." Drop zone, VR-Xyz Prime, Capital Ruins. The atmosphere was breathable, but tainted. Particulates of unknown origin drifted like ash through the air as the UNS Revenant's dropship descended into the abandoned city. The team, 6 of Earth's best, disembarked with weapons raised, their armor's environmental seals hissing against the toxic air. Lieutenant Carter adjusted her helmet's visor, scanning the buildings. This place is wrong. She wasn't exaggerating. The architecture was frozen in time, as if the entire civilization had simply stopped mid-motion. Vehicles rusted where they had been abandoned. Doors stood ajar, leading into homes filled with half-eaten meals turned to dust. Kane gestured to a skeletal corpse frozen in a silent scream. The hell happened to these people? Dr. Elena Vasquez, their xenobiologist, knelt by the remains. Her scanner beeped in alarm. "There's no sign of decomposition," she murmured. "This thing should have turned to dust centuries ago." Mercer's grip on his rifle tightened. No decomposition? No scavengers? No decay? That wasn't natural. Then the air shifted. Something watched them. Mercer turned sharply, weapon raised. His HUD flickered. For a brief moment, his visor's motion sensors detected movement, a shadow darting between ruined buildings. "Contact," he hissed. Kane reacted instantly, snapping his rifle up. Carter and Vasquez pressed against the walls, scanning the surroundings. The silence was thick, pressing against them like a physical force. Then a whisper, a sound that shouldn't exist in the vacuum of an abandoned world. "Help us?" It came from the underground entrance. Mercer signaled forward. "We're going in." Whatever was left of the VR cache, they would find it in the dark below. Subterranean descent. The tunnel stretched downward, ancient structures buried beneath layers of rock and time. Their suit lights barely pierced the abyss. As they ventured deeper, they felt it, a creeping unease, a wrongness in the air. Vasquez whispered, "I don't like this, Mercer." Neither did he. Finally, they reached a vast chamber and froze. At its center, something waited, a VR cache survivor. But it was not alive. Its body was withered, limbs stretched unnaturally as if frozen mid-transformation. Its eyes were wide, glowing with something wrong. And then it spoke. "You should not have come." Then the walls screamed, and the shadows came alive. The nightmare had begun. Chapter 2. The Shadows of VR's Eyes Prime. The screaming walls weren't a hallucination. The chamber shook violently, sending cracks spiraling up the stone. From those fissures, black tendrils slithered, writhing like things alive. The air vibrated with an unnatural frequency, a deep, bone-shaking resonance that made their helmets' audio dampeners struggle to compensate. The VR cache survivor, if it could still be called that, twitched violently. Its elongated limbs spasmed, as though something inside was trying to break free. Its jaw stretched too wide, dislocating with a sickening pop. Then it lunged. "Contact!" Mercer fired first, his rifle spitting tungsten slugs at hypersonic velocity. The rounds ripped through the VR cache's brittle body, tearing it apart, but it didn't die. Instead, it twisted unnaturally, reforming as though the damage was meaningless. Kane unleashed hell, his plasma cutter bathing the thing in searing fire. It shrieked, the sound drilling into their skulls even through their helmets' filters. Then the shadows moved. From the walls, dozens of figures emerged, their shapes wrong, humanoid but distorted, as if the very fabric of their being was unstable. Some had elongated limbs. Others had multiple mouths gaping open across their torsos. And worst of all, their eyes still carried the intelligence of the beings they had once been. "Fall back!" The team retreated, firing in controlled bursts, but the shadows swarmed. Naomi Carter screamed as one of the creatures reached for her. It barely touched her shoulder, but her suit's armor buckled as though reality itself had bent inward. She collapsed, convulsing. "Kane! Grab her!" Mercer roared. Kane hauled Carter up, her body twitching violently. The things pursued relentlessly, flowing over the walls like liquid darkness. Mercer slapped a demolition charge on the corridor's archway. Blow it now! A concussive blast roared through the chamber, collapsing the tunnel. Dust and debris rained down, sealing the nightmare behind them. For now, a moment to breathe. They regrouped in a side tunnel, Carter still shaking violently. Vasquez knelt beside her, scanning with medical instruments. Her vitals are erratic. Something is inside her suit, but I can't see it. It's like, she hesitated. Her body is phasing between two states. Kane's jaw clenched. The hell does that mean? Vasquez shook her head. It means we're dealing with something that doesn't follow our physics. Mercer gritted his teeth. They needed intel. Fast. He tapped his comms. SID-12, you still reading us? The AI's voice crackled through the channel. Distorted but functional. Affirmative, Commander. However, something is interfering with communications. Data corruption increasing exponentially. What the hell are we dealing with? There was a pause. Then SID-12 replied. Its normally calm tone tinged with something Mercer had never heard before. A non-Euclidean event. An anomaly that alters physical laws. The VR cache were not wiped out by war or disease. Mercer's blood ran cold. Then what? SID-12's answer was grim. They opened something they couldn't close. A heavy silence settled over the team. Then Carter's breathing hitched. They're still here, she whispered. Her voice was not entirely her own anymore. Mercer looked into her visor and saw her eyes flickering between human and something else. Then the ground cracked open beneath them, and they fell into the abyss. Final chapter. The abyss stares back. They fell for far too long. Their visors flickered, struggling to render the impossible. A void that was not empty. Shapes moved within it, shifting through dimensions like echoes of something that should not be. Gravity twisted and pulled in directions that didn't exist. And then, suddenly, impact! The team slammed into a hard surface, their suits absorbing most of the force. But the ground beneath them pulsed, as if they'd landed on something alive. Mercer forced himself up. Carter was barely conscious. Her helmet flickered between transparency and something wrong. Her face blurred, shifting between what he knew and a version of her that was stretched, distorted, half dissolved into static. Kane hauled her onto his shoulder. She's burning up. We need to evac now. But there was nowhere to go. The cavern stretched endlessly, its walls made of something that was neither metal nor stone. They pulsed with slow, steady rhythm, like breath, like a heartbeat. And then it spoke, not in words, but in concepts forced into their minds. You are not welcome here. The team reeled, clutching their helmets. The voice was not sound, but something deeper, an intrusion into thought itself. Mercer gritted his teeth. What the hell are you? The walls shifted, forming grotesque impressions of faces. VR cache, frozen in their last moments of terror. We are what remains. Mercer's mind raced. The VR cache hadn't just vanished. They had become this. They had stared too deep into the abyss, and the abyss had swallowed them whole. A low, rumbling laughter resonated from the walls. You should not have come. The shadows erupted. Tendrils whipped toward them, reality distorting around the black mass. Kane fired, plasma bolts tearing through the creatures, but they were formed instantly. Move. Now. They ran. The ground shook violently, shifting beneath their feet as the entity pushed into their world. SID-12's voice crackled in Mercer's comms. Commander, you must leave. Now. No shit, SID. How? The Revenant has repositioned for emergency retrieval. You must reach the surface. The only way out was up, the escape. They found an ancient VR cache lift, more biotech than machine, its organic surface flickering with faint energy. Mercer didn't question it. Get in. The team piled in, and Mercer slammed the activation panel. The lift lurched. The entity screamed. The walls collapsed inward, reality fracturing around them. Mercer caught a glimpse of something vast, something beyond dimensions, something that watched from the space between existence itself. Then the lift shot upward. The last thing he saw below was Carter, her body phasing out of reality, her face twisting in silent agony. Then she was gone. Evacuation. The Revenant's dropship hovered above the ruins. Ramp open, engines burning white-hot. The team leapt aboard, Kane hauling a barely conscious Vasquez. Mercer turned back, but Carter was not there. Carter? No answer. Only the dark. Liftoff now. The pilot obeyed. The dropship rocketed skyward, the ruins of ER's Eyes Prime collapsing below as the entity raged, its howls echoing through dimensions. The planet began to break apart. Aftermath. Back aboard the Revenant, Mercer sat in silence. Vasquez tended to Kane's wounds. The ship's AI scanned them for contamination. No infections. No signs of it following. But Carter was gone. Or worse. She was still there. Somewhere. SID-12 spoke. The anomaly is contained. For now. Mercer exhaled, staring at the void outside. They had come for answers. All they had found was a warning, and a simple, terrifying truth. The VR cache hadn't vanished. They had been consumed. And now, something else was waiting for the next fool to come too close. The end.